Okay, we need to have a serious talk about AI coding assistants, but probably not in the way you're thinking. See, there's this hidden security crisis brewing under the surface, and some really fascinating new research is pulling back the curtain. And what it reveals is this. These AIs, they aren't master architects. They're an infinite army of junior developers. And trust me, that changes everything.
It all kicks off with something Andre Karpathy perfectly named vibe coding. And if you've ever used an AI assistant, you know exactly what this feels like. It's that magical, almost frictionless flow where you're just guiding the AI with your ideas. It's amazing. But what if that incredible speed comes with a hidden price tag? Well, that's what we're here to unpack.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to dive into this vibe coding revolution. Then we'll meet the army of juniors and look at the very specific, kind of scary coding anti-patterns they create. From there, we'll tackle the de-skilling dilemma, what this all means for developers themselves. And we'll wrap up with the big, powerful shift this is forcing, the move from being a coder to becoming an architect. Let's do it.
All right, first up, the vibe coding revolution. Because look, to really get the risks, you have to first understand why it's so appealing. This idea of making programming feel, well, effortless.
So what exactly is vibe coding? Think of it this way. The developer stops being a writer and becomes more of a director. You're not banging out every single line of code anymore. Instead, you're giving prompts, you're guiding the AI, and here's the key part. You're often accepting its suggestions based on your gut, on whether the code just feels right, instead of doing a deep, line-by-line technical audit.
And I mean, the appeal is obvious, right? The promise is massive. You can build and ship faster than you ever thought possible. It lowers the barrier to entry for brand new creators, but it's that exact speed, that totally frictionless experience, that's quietly introducing a huge hidden problem.
Which brings us to the absolute core idea of this whole explainer. It is time to meet the army of juniors. This is the real, hidden persona of every single AI coding assistant out there. Now here is the critical mindset shift you have to make. Stop thinking of your AI tool as one single, all-knowing senior developer. Instead, I want you to imagine that you are now the manager of an infinite army of talented, incredibly eager junior developers. They're super fast, they follow your instructions to the letter, but, and this is a big but, they have zero real-world experience. They completely lack the judgment, the security awareness, and the architectural wisdom that you only get from years of building and breaking things in the real world.
And here's where it gets really wild. The most shocking finding from the research is that the AI isn't necessarily writing worse code. The number of vulnerabilities is actually pretty similar to what we humans produce. Nope. The real crisis is the speed. It's the sheer deployment velocity. We are generating and shipping code at a rate that no human security team on the planet could ever hope to review. We're creating an impossible bottleneck.
Just to put that into perspective for you, the average organization was already drowning in over 500,000 security alerts, and that was before this AI explosion. So now, we're basically just pouring gasoline on that fire, exponentially increasing the volume of code going out the door. The question isn't just can they keep up anymore, it's how far have they already fallen behind.
So how does this velocity crisis actually show up in the code itself? Well, it appears as these very specific, recurring problems, what we call critical anti-patterns. It's like the AI has a bad case of amnesia and has forgotten decades of hard-won software engineering wisdom.
Now, the research found 10 of these distinct anti-patterns, but let's just zoom in on 4 of the most dangerous ones. First, the AI just avoids refactoring code for long-term health. It also has this tendency to build these giant old-school monoliths instead of modern microservices. It loves to reinvent the wheel from scratch, totally ignoring trusted secure libraries. And maybe the worst one of all, it creates what's called the lie of unit tests. It generates tons of tests that look great on paper, but give you a false sense of security without actually proving the code works.
And this really gets to the heart of the difference between us and them. You know, any experienced developer has that gut instinct. You look at some messy code and you just think, oh, who wrote this? And you immediately want to fix it to make it better for the future. The AI, it has no such instinct. Its one and only goal is to solve the immediate prompt. If the code technically works, its job is done. Doesn't matter how much of a mess it is.
And the consequence of losing that reflex? It's massive technical debt. You end up with a code base that might function perfectly today, but it's going to be an absolute nightmare to maintain, to scale, or to hand off to another developer tomorrow. It's a classic short-term win for a huge long-term headache.
So this brings us to a much more subtle, but honestly, maybe a more profound risk.
The de-skilling dilemma. What is the long-term impact of all this vibe coding on us, the developers?
Descaling is basically what happens when our reliance on a tool starts to chip away at our own expertise. It's a loss of autonomy. It's a fading of that deep hands-on knowledge of the craft. And it isn't just a technical thing. It can actually weaken our moral agency, our ability to make sound ethical judgments about the things we're building.
So how does this actually happen? Well, you can think of it as a three-step process. It all starts, innocently enough, just relying on AI for some quick fixes. But pretty soon, you start to lose what the research calls material resistance, that valuable struggle with debugging and syntax, which is where the real learning happens. And then, over time, this erodes your independent judgment, slowly turning you from a creator into just a curator of AI output.
This is the really dangerous trade-off. We stop cultivating a deep, fundamental understanding of why our code works, and we start to just rely on what feels like it works. That, right there, is the essence of vibe coding, and it is the fast track to de-skilling.
But it's not all doom and gloom, not at all. In fact, this challenge is forcing a really necessary and frankly exciting change in the role of the developer. This is the great evolution, from coder to architect.
And this is the big takeaway. If you're a developer listening to this, you haven't been replaced. You've been promoted. That's right. Your job is no longer just to write lines of code. Your new job is to manage your army of AI juniors. You are the architect, you are the strategist, you are the orchestrator, and your uniquely human judgment has never, ever been more valuable.
You can think of the shift like this. The past was all about implementation, the how, but the future is all about architecture, the what and the why. Your value now comes from seeing that big picture, from designing secure systems, and from providing the critical human oversight that your AI army simply cannot.
So we'll end on this thought. AI hasn't just given you a new tool. It has given you an entire army of coders, ready and waiting to execute your vision. The only question left is, are you ready to step up and be their general?